Back in October, Sagamore Spirit announced the release of their highly anticipated Sagamore 9-year-old straight rye whiskey. It reflects Sagamore's ongoing dedication to innovation and quality in the ever-growing rye whiskey category, and also makes it Sagamore's oldest age statement to date. Is it better than the Sagamore 8-year, my rye of the year from 2023? Let's find out. It's the Mash and Drum. What's up, folks? I'm Jason C. from the Mash and Drum, and welcome back to the show. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and help me keep climbing to that 100,000 subscriber milestone here in 2024. Appreciate the support. So rye whiskey played a major part in the history of Maryland, dating back to the colonial days when the production of this historical spirit began. Rye grain was very prevalent in those days, while the other popular whiskey grains like wheat and barley were much more difficult to grow. Corn, which was still relatively new to them, was not much easier and was typically saved to provide food for the people. Rye is actually a resilient grain that can be grown in poor soil conditions and has a high tolerance for unpredictable rain levels. It was planted in the fall and would begin to grow in the spring, and by 1910, Maryland was home to about 43 or 44 different rye whiskey distilleries. It was a lot. Maryland was producing rye whiskey more than 150 years before Kentucky was even a state. Like most distillers, Prohibition hit the rye whiskey industry hard. Now, Kentucky distilleries were located in rural locations, while Maryland distilleries were in urban areas, which made things a lot more expensive. The few distilleries that remained were then converted to produce ethanol during the war. In 1972, the last rye whiskey distillery in Maryland closed its doors. Which brings us to Sagamore Spirit, who have been in the forefront of the rye whiskey revival, not only in their home state of Maryland, but across the US. Really, their unique blend of two separately aged whiskeys, a low rye whiskey mash bill of 52% rye, 43% corn, and 5% malted barley, and a high rye whiskey with a mash bill of a 95.5 rye, can bridge the gap to sippers that enjoy both sweet and spicy profiles. So let's pour this one. Man, look at the color in that. Crazy dark. The Sagamore 9-year-old straight rye whiskey is bottled at 112.6 proof, and it's available for an SRP of $79.99, so call it 80 bucks. So let's dive in and we'll compare it to the 8-year, which I loved, and see how it shakes out. So here we go. Even with that extra year on the 8-year, it's still, at 9 years old, it actually still provides a really rich fruit-forward profile, which is what I got in the 8-year when I first tried it. But the one thing I feel like this has that I don't remember, well, I'm not gonna sit here and try to remember what the 8 tasted like. We're gonna taste that in a little bit. But this 9-year definitely feels a little bit more oak forward. It smells like one of those arrangements, the fruit arrangements that you get, edible arrangements, where it's like a bunch of different fruits, but like covered a little bit in chocolate. I feel like I'm getting that in here a little bit. Yeah, definitely picking up a little strawberry here, maybe a little raspberry as well. I really like the oak and the chocolate that balances out. Yeah, the nose is fantastic. Pretty much what I was expecting. Let's see how it does on the palate. Cheers. There's a definite richness to this that just, man, this rye whiskey this year is just killing it. I'm really digging this. I like the darker notes that I'm getting here, especially for a rye whiskey. Usually rye whiskeys, especially some of those younger 95.5 ryes, are very bright, almost minty. They carry a little bit of, sometimes a little bit of a licorice note. Sometimes you get that dill note depending on the rye. This is such a bright fruit characteristic, but also dark. It gives you a little bit of like a pastry crust that's been in the oven a little bit too long. It does have a lot of kind of candied orange notes, again, I think from that rye grain as well. I feel like it gives you what you want from a good aged rye whiskey without getting too far into the oak profile, which is kind of nice. So on that sip, I actually got more of the rye grain. The rye grain came to the forefront a little bit more. So now I'm starting to pick up some of that earthiness that you get from a rye, especially a well-aged rye. Also, some of the oak is coming through as well. It's giving that pepperiness that you get from a good rye whiskey. So a lot of those fruit flavors I was getting in that first sip and on the nose, they're there, but I feel like the rye whiskey now is kind of taking over a little bit. Wow, the more I sip this, the more rye forward it gets. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm trying to, we will compare it to the 8 here in 1 second, but where you have the spice, you have the pepper, again, gives you like this nice cinnamon allspice combination, a lot of black pepper, the rye is there, the dark fruit is there, but it's still more upfront on the palate. But the oak and the rye spice really start to take over the entire experience. All right, let's pour the 8 year and see which one wins out. Do a quick, kind of a double base episode here. All right, so this is batch 2A of the Sagamore 8 year. Comes in at 111.4 proof. So let's get this poured. Let's see how big the differences are. I can tell you what, the colors are pretty close. Yeah, a lot of those same flavors are here. The really rich fruit. This one actually comes into a little bit more of an orange, almost peachy type of vibe I'm getting on the nose here, but along with like that strawberry I was getting on the 9 year. All right, let's give the 8 a try. Wow, even for just a year, the 8 is brighter. I don't think it has the oak profile that the 9 year does, which is interesting. Wow, bigger difference than I thought there would be. The 9 year, really, when you compare the two, there's definitely more of an oak influence on the 9 year, and just, you know, just for a year. But also the rye characteristics, I think in the 9 are a little bit stronger, especially on the back end of the palate compared to the 8. The 8 also has like this, a little bit of like a root beery cream soda combination. I think it's a little sweeter. The oak isn't as prevalent. It's got rye spice, but I think it leans sweeter versus rye and oak, where the 9 year I think leans a little bit more in the rye and oak and actually has some sweetness, but not as much as the 8 year. So I feel like between the two, I don't know. I like the darkness that the 9 year has, and I like that it's a little bit more peppery, but I really like those root beery kind of cherry cola flavors that I'm getting here in the 8 year. I like the 9, but I don't know if I loved it as much as the 8 year. With the 9 year it's a really good rye. I'm really curious to see how this opens up over a little bit of time, especially when I start blinding it at the end of the year with some of my other favorite ryes. So let's do a final breakdown. All right, final breakdown on the Sagamore 9-year-old straight rye whiskey. Price for this one, SRP $79.99, call it 80 bucks. Resale market value, haven't really seen these on resale, so I'm really not sure. Availability on these, I think, is gonna be above average, but depending on where Sagamore is in your state, if it's more available, it could be more limited depending on where you are. Value for this one is good. A 9-year-old rye whiskey from Sagamore at 80 bucks. I think that's a great price. I think the flavor you're getting in here is really rich. It's really dense. It's really dark. It's less sweet than the 8 as we saw, but I still think it's a really good rye whiskey. Most I pay for this one is 80 bucks. I think retail is right where it should be, especially given what's in the bottle. When it comes to rye whiskeys, there are so many good ones these days, and it's kind of hard to narrow it down to just a few. But I think Pikesville would still be a great alternative to this one. Pikesville's 6 years old. I know it's a few years younger than this one is. However, the proof point is 110, so it's really close to what you're getting in the Sagamore. I think the Peerless single barrel ryes are actually really great. Not the batch product that you usually see, but the single barrels, especially the single barrel selections you can find in stores and of course at the distillery. I think that some of those have such rich flavors. They can lean fruity. They can lean almost into a super spice driven type of rye whiskey. But if you find the right single barrel, the proof points are near this one. The proof points are near what this one is. And I think it would make a fantastic alternative to this. The only problem is those are usually around 120 bucks versus this one, which is 80 bucks. And lastly, the Jack Daniel's barrel proof ryes. Those could get to about, I think, 6-7 years old. Some of those single barrels can get really fruit forward, really rich, really dense. I know the proof points usually get a lot higher than this one, but I think for the money, it's a great alternative to this one as well. All right, and lastly, is this a skip, a try before you buy, or a buy or buy and back it up? This one's tough. I think it's good enough to call it a buy. However, if you really, really love the 8 year, I would probably try this before you buy it. Because I do think it's a different type of experience. Where I said the 8 year was definitely a little bit sweeter, a little bit richer on kind of like the fruit forwardness, and again, kind of like that cherry cola cream soda combination, maybe like a little bit of a root beer that it has. This one doesn't really have that for me. It comes in with more oak, more rye spice, more baking spices. It's a little bit of a different experience, which I don't think is a bad thing. I just think that certain people that like the sweeter profile would probably like the 8 over the 9. For me though, I think this is really good enough to buy, especially for the price point, and especially if you love rye whiskeys. But I don't know. when you compare both of them, I'd be eager to see if any of you guys have done the comparison, what you think, but let me know down in the comments. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this review for the new Sagamore 9-year straight rye whiskey. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button below. Please hit that like button, and if you haven't yet, find me on Instagram. Let me know down in the comments if you've had both of them, if you've had the 9-year, if you were kind of waiting for reviews of the 9-year to see if you were going to try it first. Always curious to see what you guys have to say, and as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share with. Cheers, and I'll see you next time right here on the Master and Drum. Cheers, folks.